The village of Black Hollow lay nestled in a secluded valley, overshadowed by the towering iron keep. The fortress had been abandoned for over a century, its dark silhouette a constant reminder of its bloody history. Tales of lost treasure and unearthly guardians surrounded the place, making it a challenge few dared to face. The legend was simple, yet tantalizing. The last lord of the keep, Sir Aldrich, had amassed a fortune during his reign. But as his enemies closed in, he sealed his treasure deep within the keep and cast a curse upon it before disappearing forever. Generations had come and gone, and no one who entered the keep ever returned. Despite the warnings, 5 men stood at the edge of the forest one misty morning, staring up at the ominous structure. Among them was Eric, a rugged hunter with a sharp mind and sharper instincts. By his side was Garrick, a blacksmith built like an oak tree, his hammer slung over his shoulder. Next was Roland, a quick-witted merchant who never passed up a chance to increase his wealth. Then there was Finn, the youngest of the group, who was eager to prove himself. Finally, there was Marcus, a scholar with a tattered journal filled with notes about the keep's history. "Are we really doing this?" Finn asked, clutching his satchel nervously. "We're here, aren't we?" Garrick grunted. "No sense turning back now." Eric nodded, his gaze fixed on the keep. "Stay focused. We go in, find what we came for, and get out before nightfall." "What if the stories are true?" Finn persisted. "What if the keep is cursed?" Roland smirked. "Curses don't fill stomachs, boy. Gold does the ascent." The group began their climb up the narrow, winding path leading to the Iron Keep. The forest around them grew denser, the air colder. A sense of foreboding hung heavy over them, but no one spoke of it. As they reached the gates, they paused to take in the sight. The iron portcullis was rusted and slightly ajar, as if inviting them in. The walls were covered in creeping vines, and the towers loomed like silent sentinels. "Doesn't look so bad," Roland said, forcing a grin. "Just an old ruin." Marcus stepped forward, inspecting the gate. "The architecture is fascinating, late Gothic but with unique reinforcements. It's as if they were expecting something worse than an army." "Fascinating or not, we're burning daylight," Eric said. "Let's move." The group entered the keep, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The interior was just as desolate as the exterior. Broken furniture, shattered windows, and cobwebs in every corner. Yet despite the decay, the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were watching them. The first trial. They reached the great hall, a vast chamber with a vaulted ceiling. At the center stood a massive stone table, its surface engraved with strange symbols. Marcus immediately began jotting down notes. "What do you think it means?" Finn asked, peering over his shoulder. "Some kind of warning," Marcus murmured. "Or a riddle." Garrick rolled his eyes. "We don't need riddles. We need gold. Let's find the vault." As they searched the room, Eric noticed something odd. The symbols on the table seemed to glow faintly when touched. He traced one with his finger, and a deep rumble echoed through the hall. A hidden door slid open at the far end. "Well done," Roland said, clapping Eric on the back. "See, we're already making progress." They stepped through the door, entering a narrow corridor. The air grew colder with each step, their breaths visible in the dim torchlight. The walls were lined with carvings depicting battles, betrayals, and rituals. "This place gives me the creeps," Finn whispered. "Good," Eric replied. "Fear keeps you alive." To the Guardian. The corridor opened into a circular chamber. At its center stood a pedestal with a gleaming artifact, a golden amulet encrusted with jewels. "There it is," Roland breathed, his eyes gleaming with greed. He stepped forward, but Eric held him back. "Wait, it's too easy." "Too easy? It's right there." Eric scanned the room. The floor was marked with a series of pressure plates, some worn and others untouched. "It's a trap. Step wrong and we're done for." Marcus knelt beside him, studying the plates. The carvings might offer a clue. They seemed to depict a sequence. Good, Eric said. Figure it out. As Marcus deciphered the carvings, the others waited, tense and silent. Finally, Marcus pointed to a series of symbols on the floor. Step only on these. Anything else will trigger the mechanism. Eric tested the path first, his movements deliberate. When he reached the pedestal unscathed, he motioned for the others to follow. One by one, they crossed safely. Roland reached for the amulet, but Eric stopped him again. Don't! Look closer. The amulet was resting on a delicate pressure switch. Removing it carelessly would trigger another trap. Can we disable it? Garrick asked. I think so, Eric said, carefully wedging a stone beneath the switch. After a moment of adjustment, he lifted the amulet free. Nothing happened. Finally, Roland said, grinning. Now let's find the rest. The curse unleashed. As they returned to the great hall, the air grew even colder, and an unnatural wind swept through the keep. The torches flickered wildly, and a low, guttural growl echoed through the halls. What was that? Finn asked, his voice trembling. Stay calm, Eric said, though even he looked uneasy. They reached the great hall only to find the hidden door had closed behind them. As they tried to pry it open, the growl grew louder, and a shadowy figure appeared at the far end of the room. It was humanoid but distorted, its eyes glowing with an eerie blue light. It moved with unnatural speed, its twisted limbs contorting as it approached. Run! Eric shouted. The group scattered, each man fleeing down a different corridor. Eric and Marcus stuck together, their footsteps echoing as they searched for an exit. We shouldn't have taken the amulet, Marcus panted. The legends were true. We'll deal with that later, Eric snapped. Just keep moving. The separation elsewhere, Garrick and Finn had taken refuge in a small chamber, barricading the door with whatever they could find. What is that thing? Finn whispered, his face pale. I don't know, Garrick admitted, but it bleeds, it dies. Remember that. Roland, meanwhile, found himself alone, clutching the amulet tightly. His greed had driven him to take it, but now he regretted ever stepping foot in the keep. Come on, he muttered to himself. Find the others. Find a way out. The final stand. The group eventually reconvened in the throne room, a massive chamber with high ceilings and a large, shattered throne at its center. The shadowy figure pursued them relentlessly, its growls reverberating through the walls. We can't keep running, Garrick said, gripping his hammer. We fight! Eric nodded. Agreed. Marcus, anything in your notes that might help? Marcus flipped through his journal. The curse binds the guardian to the treasure. If we return the amulet, it might leave us alone. And if it doesn't? Garrick asked. Then we fight, Eric said. As the creature entered the room, the men prepared for battle. Garrick swung his hammer with all his might, but the creature moved faster than anything human. Eric's arrows barely slowed it down. Finn and Marcus tried to distract it, while Roland reluctantly placed the amulet back on the pedestal. The creature paused, its glowing eyes fixed on the amulet. For a moment, it seemed to retreat, its form fading into the shadows. It's working, Marcus shouted. But just as hope returned, the creature let out a deafening roar and lunged at them. The group fought with everything they had, but the creature was relentless. In the chaos, Marcus noticed a series of symbols glowing on the walls. There's another way out, he yelled, pointing to a hidden door. Eric and Garrick held the creature at bay while the others worked to open the door. Finally, it slid open, revealing a tunnel leading outside. Go! Eric shouted. One by one they escaped, with Eric and Garrick bringing up the rear. The creature pursued them, but stopped abruptly as they crossed the threshold. It let out an ear-splitting scream before vanishing into the darkness. Lutton learned. The men collapsed in the forest, exhausted and battered. The amulet was gone, left behind with the rest of the treasure. Was it worth it? Finn asked, his voice tinged with bitterness. No, Eric admitted. Some things are better left buried. Marcus nodded. The keep wasn't just a fortress. It was a prison for something far worse than us. As dawn broke, the group made their way back to Black Hollow, vowing never to speak of the Iron Keep again. The town of Greyhaven had always been peculiar. Nestled between two great mountain ranges, it was a place where the sun rarely shone brightly, its rays muted by a perpetual shroud of mist. The townsfolk kept to themselves, and outsiders often remarked on how quiet the place seemed. But beneath the surface lay an unspoken truth that bound the people together. No one went near the old monastery on the hill. Built centuries ago by an unknown order, the monastery had long fallen into disrepair. Its stone walls, once majestic, were now crumbling, and its grand bell tower leaned precariously. Yet, the silence surrounding the structure wasn't just due to its abandonment. The people of Greyhaven believed the monastery was cursed, watched over by entities they called the Silent Watchers. Few dared speak of them, but the stories persisted, shadowy figures that roamed the grounds at night, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The Outsider's Arrival. One autumn morning, a group of strangers arrived in Greyhaven. There were 4 of them. Jonas, a rugged adventurer with a keen eye for treasure. Elias, a historian who had spent years researching obscure ruins. Connor, a sharp-tongued scout with a knack for finding hidden paths. And Micah, a stoic ex-soldier who carried a broadsword as easily as others might carry a walking stick. The group's arrival caused a stir, as outsiders always did, but the townsfolk grew particularly uneasy when they overheard the strangers' plans. "We're heading to the monastery," Elias announced over a tankard of ale at the local inn. The innkeeper nearly dropped the plate he was carrying. "You'd do well to leave it alone," he muttered. "Nothing good has ever come from that place." Jonas chuckled. That's what they always say about these old ruins, and yet treasure is always there for those brave enough to look. "It's not just an old ruin," the innkeeper insisted. "The Watchers protect it. You won't come back the same if you come back at all." Connor smirked. "We've dealt with worse. Ghosts, curses, they're just stories." Micah said nothing, his expression unreadable. The journey up. The next morning, the group set off toward the monastery. The trail was steep and overgrown, but Connor led the way with practiced ease. The mist thickened as they climbed, and the air grew colder. "You feel that?" Jonas asked, pulling his cloak tighter. "It's just the altitude," Elias replied, though his voice wavered slightly. Micah scanned the tree line, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "We're being watched," he said quietly. Connor laughed. "Of course we are. It's a small town. People are probably peeking through their curtains, wondering how long it'll take us to turn back." But Micah shook his head. "Not by people." The others exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. The monastery. By midday they reached the monastery. It was as eerie as the townsfolk had described. The gates hung ajar, their iron hinges rusted. The courtyard beyond was overgrown with weeds, and the once beautiful carvings on the walls were faded and cracked. "This is it," Elias said, his voice tinged with awe. "The Order of the Silent Flame. They were said to guard something powerful, an artifact of immense value." Jonas grinned. "Then let's find it." The group stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls. Dust motes danced in the faint light streaming through the broken windows. The air was thick with the scent of decay and mildew. They split up to search the rooms. Connor found remnants of old furniture and broken tools, while Jonas uncovered what looked like a storeroom, its shelves bare. Elias discovered a library, its shelves lined with moldering tomes, but most were too damaged to read. It was Micah who found the first sign of trouble. In the chapel, he noticed strange markings on the floor, circles and symbols etched deep into the stone. They looked almost like claw marks, but larger and more deliberate. "Elias," he called. The historian joined him, his eyes widening as he examined the markings. "This isn't random," Elias murmured. "It's a warning." "A warning for what?" Jonas asked, appearing behind them. Before Elias could answer, a low, guttural sound echoed through the halls. It wasn't quite a growl, nor was it the wind. It was something in between, something unnatural. "What was that?" Connor asked, his bravado faltering. The Watchers stir. The sound grew louder, closer. The group regrouped in the main hall, their weapons drawn. The light from their torches flickered, as if the darkness itself were alive. "We need to leave," Micah said. "Now." "No," Elias insisted. "We're close. Whatever the monks were protecting, it's here." "Maybe they weren't protecting it," Jonas said grimly. "Maybe they were keeping it contained." The growl turned into a series of clicks and whispers, echoing from every direction. Then they saw them. At first, they were just shadows, moving unnaturally along the walls. But as the torchlight flickered, the shadows took shape. Tall, gaunt figures with elongated limbs and glowing, featureless eyes. "The Silent Watchers," Elias whispered, his face pale. One of the figures stepped forward, its movements jerky, almost insect-like. It raised a hand, and the torches dimmed further. "Run!" Micah bellowed, breaking the group's paralysis. The chase. The group fled deeper into the monastery, the Watchers in pursuit. The creatures moved with horrifying speed, their limbs contorting as they crawled along walls and ceilings. Connor led the way, his sharp eyes scanning for a path out. "There!" he shouted, pointing to a staircase descending into the lower levels. They barreled down the steps, their breaths ragged. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in. At the bottom, they found themselves in a vast chamber. In the center stood an ornate pedestal, and atop it rested a crystal sphere, glowing faintly with an inner light. "That's it," Elias said, his voice trembling with both fear and excitement. "The artifact." Jonas stepped forward, but Micah grabbed his arm. "Don't touch it." "We didn't come this far to leave empty-handed," Jonas snapped. Before Micah could stop him, Jonas reached for the sphere. The moment his fingers touched it, the entire chamber trembled. The glow from the sphere intensified, and the Watchers' whispers turned into a deafening roar. The artifact's curse. Jonas screamed as the sphere's light enveloped him. His body convulsed, and when the light faded, he collapsed to the ground, unmoving. "What happened to him?" Connor asked, his voice barely audible over the roaring. Elias knelt beside Jonas, his hands trembling. "He's gone," he said, his voice hollow. "The artifact. It's not meant for us." The Watchers poured into the chamber, their forms flickering like flames. "We can't fight them," Elias said, "but maybe we can trap them again." "How?" Connor demanded. Elias pointed to the pedestal. "The sphere. It's a seal. If we put it back, it might contain them." Micah picked up the sphere, its light pulsing faintly. The Watchers hesitated, their movements slowing as if they feared it. "Hurry," Elias urged. Micah placed the sphere back on the pedestal. The light flared, and the Watchers let out an unearthly wail. One by one, they were pulled back into the shadows, their forms dissipating like smoke. The aftermath. The chamber grew silent once more, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Jonas's lifeless body lay at their feet, a stark reminder of the cost. "We should leave," Connor said, his voice subdued. Elias nodded, his earlier excitement replaced by a somber resolve. The artifact was never meant to be disturbed. It's better left forgotten. Micah didn't say a word as he carried Jonas's body out of the monastery. A warning. heated. The group returned to Greyhaven, their spirits broken. They buried Jonas on the outskirts of town, marking his grave with a simple stone. Elias stayed behind, determined to document the truth about the monastery. Micah and Connor left the town shortly after, vowing never to return. The people of Greyhaven noticed the changes in the survivors, their quietness, their haunted gazes. The story of the silent watchers remained unspoken, but the lesson was clear. Some doors are best left unopened. As the years passed, the monastery fell further into ruin, its secrets buried once more. The silent watchers remained within, waiting for the next foolhardy soul to disturb their eternal vigil.